Let's blow this up. Look Alive Bomb Squad, we're back for the first installment of the Livestream series in Season 3 of Let's Blow This Up. I'm Jason Sircone, and it feels damn good to be back on the microphone with you on a Wednesday night here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and wherever you're at in Livestream land. We're going to kick this series off in style because I love the opportunity to dive a little deeper into certain subjects. And if we can get into how you out there in the bomb squad and even beyond the bomb squad, think about some of the decisions you make in regards to communication, in regards to connection, and in regards to how you choose the podcasts that you listen to and ultimately get invested in, then that makes for a damn good conversation. And to make that happen, I can't do it alone. I never do here on the live stream. Well, I take that back. Sometimes I try to go solo, but it's a lot more fun when I've got my friends to join me here on the show. And tonight we're making that happen with none other than Mr. Doug Downs from Stories and Strategies for Public Relations and Marketing. What is going on, Doug?
Hey, man. Good. I love the opening.
Thanks, brother.
I got to admit, given the title, I was expecting some animation off the top. My level as a viewer, my level expectation was up there, but you hit it.
Did I? Okay. I always set the bar high with that theme, and you're not the first one to compliment it. Again, it's to pump us all up. I know we talked about here before we got started. What's the goal? Is it to pump people up? Is it to change some thinking? And
yeah,
so was a little bit of both.
I was asking Jason, so blow this up. What is that? Does that mean high energy rock and roll? Because Jason's an energy guy. Or does it mean let's break the pattern? Let's be the blue M&M in the bowl full of red M&Ms.
Yes, sir.
Which one is it?
I would say a little bit of both. It's hard to say that I'm not going to do one over the other. Like I told you, my whole thing is changing thought processes, changing some thinking when it comes to how podcasting works, what it can do for your business, and how it can be produced. Sometimes we get locked into these age-old strategies, and it's hard to even say age-old when we're in an industry that's just a little over 20 years old at this point. Yeah. But a lot of people get locked into a certain way of producing their show. And a lot of times, if time isn't considered in those isn't factored into those plans, they can get burnt out. They can start to resent their show, and they ultimately walk away from it before they ever experience a breakthrough. And I can't be in everybody's head, but I can say I'm pretty sure that anybody that has a podcast that only got to the 3rd episode, before they got to that point, they were super excited and pumped to bring this show to life. And they probably had a ton of ideas, and they were really looking to run hard and make a big difference with this show and make something happen. But once they got in the trenches and didn't see the world show up after the first couple episodes, they probably said, I'm out. And that's, again, it's the wrong mindset, and that's where we're starting. And that's a good way to lead into what we're talking about tonight. What do you think?
Cool. Yeah. What are your measurables? Well, how do you define success? And nothing can suck the life out of you faster than high expectations for your podcast. And as it turns out, even though all your friends think you're funny and really interesting, just off the cuff, the rest of the world doesn't think you're that funny.
No,
that interesting, right?
I'll tell you, when you're in this space, even if you've got a small audience or a big one, you've got to be ready for people to not like what you have to say. And like I often tell my daughter, as soon as you can make peace with people not giving a shit, or I'm sorry, let me say that over. As soon as you can make peace with not giving a shit what other people think of you, life is fun, man. You can have so much fun. You can do so many good things because you're not worried about what other people are saying and how other people are looking at you. It makes a huge difference.
Teach me how. Teach me how. That's the recipe to life.
Well, I've only got 56 minutes left, so I can't promise anything in that time frame. But I can promise that we're going to have a good conversation. And for our friends out in the Bomb Squad tonight, if you're joining us live on YouTube, on Facebook, and on LinkedIn, as you do every Wednesday night at 8:00 p.m., drop some comments, say hello, let us know you're in the house. If you've got a question for myself and for Doug, and as we dig into tonight's topic, we're happy to put that question center stage and answer it for you here on the show. Doug, I've got to kick off with this because I think it's a good way to lead, and it instantly intrigued me. As you know, and anybody that's been a guest here on the show, I typically share a brief questionnaire just to get to know about you and your experience in the podcast world. Things that excite you, things that inspire you. One thing that I saw from you was this theory called nudge, the nudge theory.
Yeah.
I want to know more about this, and I'm sure the Bomb Squad is too, because I think it will bleed into our topic tonight, which is how people get invested in your podcast and in your overall production, whether it's video, audio, combination of both. Ultimately, if you're a content creator, this is going to be an episode you want to pay attention to, because this digs into that psychology.
Yeah.
So let's start off with nudge theory. Tell us what that's all about, Doug.
You bet. So Cass Sunstein, I believe, is the original author of the concept of nudge theory. And like any solid psychology today, it was coined back in the 70s and even early 80s. So it takes some time to become proven scientific theory.
Sure.
When you go to your local grocery store, I'll bet that when you come in, you probably come in on the left-hand side. Not all of them, some of them on the right. But you come in on one side or the other. You never come into your grocery store in the middle, ever. And when you come in, that music is playing. There are fresh fruits and vegetables that are right there. And there's a bakery that's right there. And you can smell the bakery. Whether maybe you've been there a lot and you don't even realize you smell, but you expect it. So all of that is part of nudge theory. In fact, the grocery store is just a perfect example of nudge theory. As you walk down the aisles, the things that are at eye level are the most convenient for you. Other stuff that's down low, there's a little bit of effort, and stuff that's maybe a bit higher, there's a little bit of effort to all of that. Then those impulse buys, right? People Magazine, the candy, that Diet Coke, and it's refrigerated. How handy is that? All of those are examples of nudge theory. And the scientific theory is, instead of shoving things in your face, instead of me trying to force you to do this and not that, I can nudge you in a way that you are making the choice. Let me give you another example.
Yeah.
There are national efforts to get people to eat healthier. Well, what if when I got in line at the cafeteria, it was difficult for me to go get the puddings? I would have to leave the lineup, go to a difficult area to go get the puddings, but the salads and the healthier stuff, I mean, the yogurts were right there and handy. Would the sales of yogurts and salads go up? Yeah, you bet. That's nudge theory in action. That's a perfect example of nudge theory. And gradually, more and more government institutions have started to invest in nudge theory. In the US, there's a nudge team. There are huge nudge teams in the UK. They're big believers in nudge theory. In Canada, they had one, but like everything else, they just decided to rely on the US version of the nudge team. There's just rely on the US and whatever they decide to do. But this is so we can nudge people in the direction that we as a society think to be the most valuable, toward health, taking care of ourselves. And then you get into a whole philosophical debate. Am I nudging you? If we accept the fact that by nudging you, I don't have control of you, you have control of you, but by nudging you, I have influence. Am I exercising that influence for the betterment of society, or am I simply nudging you because I want you to buy my brand of this or that?
Yeah.
In podcasting, your podcast art is a nudge. If you design episode specific art, or on YouTube, the thumbnail, that's a nudge.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Your opening animation. Your opening animation is a nudge, because you get 0.3 seconds to keep people for 3 seconds, to keep people for 30 seconds, to keep them for 3 minutes, and then to hopefully keep them for 30.
Right.
You got to nudge them every step of the way. So that's nudge theory to a T. And it's about invisible nudges that people don't realize they're being encouraged or nudged. And they are making choices for themselves, but they're making choices that we are influencing.
And I think we've seen a lot of this influenced in the sales market now, across the board, because sales, in my opinion, has changed so much, because you don't see that hardcore in your face, I'm not stopping until I get a yes out of you type of salesperson anymore, because that just doesn't work anymore. A perfect example, I just got a new car back in December, and my salesman was just he's the coolest dude in the world. And we had a great time, and we were just shooting the shit back and forth, and he was helping me along the way and answering questions, but there was never a hard sell in there. I think he knew he had me because it was my lease was up and I had to get a new one. But at the same time, he was never in a pressure situation making me feel like I had to do something. But now that I'm learning this theory from you, he was definitely pushing me towards a certain
He was
type
selling
of
you.
car. Yeah. And but again, it wasn't against my own will, or I didn't ever feel like I was getting forced into a certain situation. He was just slowly moving me down the path of this is going to be the right move for you, and this is going to work out the best for you in the long run, and you're going to be happy with your decision and ultimately be happy with me, so you refer more business my way.
The Edelman Institute is an international public relations and marketing institute. Every year it does this trust barometer. So who do we trust? Do we trust scientists? Do we trust government? Do we trust media? And government and media just keep sliding like lower and lower. Podcasters, eh? Podcasters are up.
Yeah.
But number one for the last 10 years straight that we trust is someone just like me. Not meaning me, but whoever you are, you trust someone just like you. So when you talk about that salesperson, all he was doing was showing you he's just like you.
Yeah.
And he believes in this product without pushing it on you. Yeah, he was nudging you all the way.
Yeah.
All the way. Realtors do that when they drive up to the house in their big expensive vehicle, supposedly because the suggestion is they can get money for their clients and thereby make money for themselves.
Sure. Think about it this way, Doug, and I want to ask you this because you may have noticed, and I don't know if viewers of the show, listeners of this show notice, I've sort of flipped the format of how I bring a guest onto the show, because your typical podcast interview, when someone comes onto the show, the first question you normally get, what is it?
What's your name? What do you do? Where are you from? What's your background?
Yeah, tell me about yourself.
Blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, and for me, I think, believe me, I think the
Boring.
stories are great. But that's it. Like, talk about the journey that a person goes on when they choose to consume a piece of content. They're looking for a solution. It's answering that question, what's in it for me? They want to know what they showed up for is going to get delivered to them as fast as possible. Your 15-minute story to kick things off isn't why they came. At the same time, I feel that as a listener of my show, they're entrusting me to bring on good people, to tell good stories, to give them the information that they want to learn more about, to have fun in the moment, whether they're watching live or listening to the audio replay. For me, this is where it's at now. I'm building up trust in my audience to say, I'm bringing you good people. I've looked at what these people have to say, what they do, and I know that I can have a great conversation with them that you can consume and enjoy as well, and ultimately learn something from. And I think the whole tell me about yourself thing can make a show go off the rails quick, because what if a person starts telling a 25-minute story and you can't find a way to cut in? Like, half your time is taken up on that story. I like to interweave what you do, which we'll do throughout our conversation, and how that impacts the entire conversation versus just giving you all of this stuff up front, which may make a person check out because that's not why they came.
Yeah. 0.3 seconds to earn 3 seconds, to earn 30 seconds, and so on and so on and so on. And who are you? What do you do? What are your creds? Flip, right? On YouTube, I can change the channel real easy.
Yeah, we've got the scroll feature on everything that we do now. It's easy.
YouTube is nudging me, right? There's other videos on my screen. Hey, you don't like this? How about you click over here, right? And then there's stuff that pops up on YouTube. These social media platforms are brilliant, of course, because they tap into the human algorithm, and nudge theory is a big part of that. We're emotional creatures that think, not thinking creatures with emotion. And the difference is we'll do things on impulse, and you got to hook people all along the way or nudge them.
That was one of the most scary / amazing things. Did you watch The Social Dilemma, the documentary on Netflix?
I think I did. Is it a couple of years old now?
Yeah.
I have trouble with titles. I remember it when I see it.
Yeah, they were talking about how basically social media has just, how the algorithm has basically made us a slave to that algorithm. And here is how they feed us content based on our behavior and how long we stare at things. And that was the one that when they said that I did not know that in the moment. When they said, they are monitoring how long you actually look at something.
Yep.
And that will tell them, okay, give more of that. Blows my mind. But that's how these algorithms are built, and they're only continuing to get more and more intuitive and learn more and more about us. So those suggestions are typically spot on. Unless you accidentally click on an ad that you're trying to scroll past, and then you just get bombarded with nonsense. Like
you spend 3 seconds on it instead of 1, and the algorithm knows.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
crazy, right?
You know what else spooks me out is my phone. I swear to God. So my phone's not off. It's on, but it's not on. So you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I swear to God, my phone is listening to me. And
Absolutely
I'll bet
it
you
is.
I get something about nudge theory or grocery stores that pops up as an ad or even in the social media algorithm. I swear to God, my phone is, and I'm not a tinfoil. I'm not wearing any tinfoil or any of that Howard Hughes stuff. I honestly think that my phone is checking me out.
You've got 2 eyes and 2 ears just like me, my friend. I feel the same way. Mine's sitting next to me. There have been times where I remember one that I remember specifically. We were talking about streaming services. I was at my parents' house, and my dad has a bar downstairs, and we were sitting there talking about it, and he has an Alexa speaker there, and I had asked Alexa something about it. It wasn't 5 minutes later that I go on my phone, and the next 3 ads that I saw were all for streaming services. One was for Fubo, another for Hulu. I was just like, Jesus, like,
right. And that's not geospatial. That's not, I went to the hardware store and suddenly got a bunch of hardware ads. I understand geospatial ads, and they can target where you are
right
physically. I get that. No, this is honestly, I think our devices kind of listen to us, but
and
it's here. I don't fight it. It's here. I
No,
don't talk about,
and it's like, also, there's a flip side of the coin. Sometimes that's convenient.
Oh, we want it.
Whether we want to admit it or not. Yeah, we're sitting here saying, "Oh my God, that's scary," but yeah, sometimes that's super cool. That now we're getting fed this information. It was what we were after in the first place. Now we can learn more if we choose to.
Google finishes my thought way better than I was thinking. I can start with this clumsy question and Google. Oh, you're trying to ask this. That's right. I'm a smart guy. Yes, I am.
Yeah, I admittedly watching in just as background. This is a terrible discovery. Hell's Kitchen on
Gordon Ramsay.
Yeah, I love Gordon Ramsay, but that show is stupid. And I'm realizing now as I get a little into it why I stopped watching it, because they just went complete cheesy pun, which a good pun here and there is great, but when you're doing it every other sentence, it's blah. But I was watching it, and they changed the maitre d', and I was wondering why he left. And I pulled up Google on my phone, and I typed in, why did JP, which was his name, and it completed it right there, leave Hell's Kitchen. I was like, Jesus, like, apparently I'm not the only one that wondered why that guy left.
Do you find that
they're ready for you?
When we talk about, we're going to break down, why people listen. I've created some personas and all that.
Yeah.
And one of the things in doing it that I came across was the heavier people listen to podcasts, I think the less likely they are to like the big network podcasts. And it's because they all of a sudden break into puns or things that are designed to please the lowest common denominator or be non-offensive to the most people, instead of like niching in on something and hone. The way they got there was by niching in and honing their target and blowing it up by being different. And so I find when people listen to a heavy set of podcasts, they like the indies. They don't like the networks. And when they don't, most people are not heavy podcast listeners. They're lighter podcast listeners. They will listen to the indies because they're safe. And it's what everyone else is listening to. And they seem to push the envelope, but they don't. They don't. That's,
Yeah, and it's always been one of the fears that I have in the back of my mind, that someday that the freedom that we have in the independent scene with podcasting all of a sudden goes away and gets.
Oh, how are you talking? Your phone hears you talking independently and clamps down on you? Who's coming down on you?
Now, hopefully that's a long ways off, because it's nice to have. But it's also, I think it falls under the same umbrella as social media in regards to opinion and what you can say and do, but you can't use copyrighted music and things like that. And that's completely fine. But you're in your pulpit and you have your abilities to spout off opinions and say what you want to say.
Well, and I would defend free speech and free will. Those are core human values. Would I defend hate speech? Absolutely not.
Right.
Where's the line exactly on that?
Yeah.
I suppose that's a whole other path.
I was gonna say we might have to do part 2 to dig deeper into that one. But let's shift it back to podcasting.
Let's not blow it up that much.
No,
Let's just
we
blow it
got-
up
yeah.
a little bit.
Blow it up with some semblance of sanity in our
Okay.
lives.
All right.
We'll get some booze and then we'll light that one up one night. We'll light that
done.
fuse and see where
Well, I'm
it goes.
drinking straight vodka tonight just to welcome. No,
Oh, there you go. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
well.
what. Yeah, I got Jack Daniels in here. I gotta have a good time somehow. So
Mhm.
let's tap into this a little bit more on the
Okay.
podcasting side. And again, you mentioned it with my show with the nudge of a theme song that grabs attention, and I'm enamored by this with what gets a person's mind in the right place to want to consume a piece of content, whether it be a podcast, the video form of that podcast, what gets them invested. And I know you've actually done some homework that you've brought to the show tonight. Let's dive into that. Let's talk about our listener personas and how this all unfolds.
Yeah. So rather than be instructional, I want to tell you 3 different stories, and it's about 3 different people. Because I'll hold up a photo. Can you see that? Okay. It's in black and white.
I'll say if you're listening to the audio replay, the answer is no. But for our viewers here tonight on the live stream, you get the visual.
It's a picture of a lady we're going to call Joe. She's a professional. She's looking at her phone. She's got a pair of headphones on. She's clearly a podcast listener, strong, intelligent person, right? Now, Joe, I'm going to call a heavy podcast listener. Her listening habits are she listens to at least 1 episode of a podcast every single day. Often multiple podcasts per day. They're part of what she does. It depends on the length. She has a rotating library of between 15 and 20 podcasts across different genres, deep dive investigative series, philosophy, history, technology, niche interests that she has. She prefers long form, thought provoking content that challenges perspectives and introduces new ideas, content that blows it up. She skips the mainstream podcast, the network stuff, because they sound so polished. They're surface level. They're trying to please the most people. They're not speaking to her. They're speaking to the masses. She has a strong preference for independent creators, especially those who take risks, who blow it up and explore unconventional topics. She uses podcast apps that have premium features, Pocket Casts, Overcast, to organize her listening, and often listens at a playback speed of 1.5 to 2 times. That's a weakness that Joe has, right? Joe thinks she can keep up with all this stuff by listening at 1.5 to 2.
Yeah.
Listening context. She has a morning routine. She'll listen to news breakdowns, industry specific podcasts. I said that Joe works in public relations, so she'll listen to PR podcasts like Stories and Strategies. Not that I'm mentioning anything, while she's making coffee or getting ready for work. Then when she is commuting or walking during the day, she also has a pair of earbuds in. She's using podcasts as a substitute for music. Her Spotify list, she has like 1,000 songs on her Spotify list, but she's heard them all 1 billion times. So she's not listening to music. She likes to listen to podcasts and immerse herself in the storytelling during those long walks. She plays background-friendly, information-dense podcasts while she's working. So while she's in her spreadsheets, she pops in the earbuds and she's listening to a podcast. She's learned how to focus on her spreadsheet while she's listening to the podcast kind of peripherally. During the evening wind down, she'll swap from the heavy intellectual podcasts to the more conversational or comedy-based podcasts. There might be a gripping investigative series, a true crime series that she's digging right now. And she'll follow her hosts on Twitter, Patreon, and Reddit. Sometimes she contributes to the discussions in Q&A. So she's a bit evangelical like that. And in terms of retention and engagement, Joe is highly engaged. She actively discusses and applies podcast insights in her daily life, constantly quoting to her friend, well, there's a podcast I was listening to, and they said she might actually take notes for herself during a podcast episode. She might bookmark a specific episode and come back to it. She might check out the transcript of a podcast episode just so she's got it. She's willing to financially support podcast creators, and she's extremely loyal. If a podcast consistently delivers, Joe will stick with that podcast for years. So that's Joe, and she's the heavy listener. Okay. Questions, thoughts? Yeah.
Well, my first question is, with Joe consuming that much content, how does a new podcast break into her rotation?
That's really tough.
Right?
It's got to be,
it's got to
be delivering something the others aren't already. It can't be just fitting the format. The others, maybe the art first catches her eye, maybe the name of it, right? It's some sort of niche interest that she has, but the name is taking a twist on something. And she's been thinking about that. Well, what is that? And she'll give it that, let me give that the 2-3 minute, check this out before I decide to fit this into my rotation. Okay. But yeah, podcasts are like loyal friends.
Yeah. And I think a lot of what you're explaining here, it tells the story about how you design that cover art, how you title your show, how your description breaks down in a few sentences exactly what somebody's going to experience. Something I'm going to be talking about more on this season upcoming, the trailer. How you use your trailer as a way to capture new listeners versus as a placeholder, which is what way too many people do. Hey, we're going to start a podcast, and they're using it just to get content out so they can get uploaded onto Apple, Spotify, so on and so forth. No, this should be something that's utilized, because if a person is in discovery mode and they find your trailer and you give them a nice sample of what your show is going to be, they're subscribing. So when you start putting live content out there, they're ready for you.
You want Joe to be your listener because Joe will talk about your podcast. If you and I believe in organic growth, which I do, someone just like me, if Joe is just like me and Joe says, hey, Doug, check out Jason's podcast. I'm going to check out Jason's podcast.
Right.
If I hear an ad for Jason's podcast, even if I like it, I might not remember. Right. If I happen to come across you when I'm searching, I might check you out. I don't know. Does he look okay? But if my friend Joe, who's just like me, suggests it, I'm going to do it. Yeah. And Joe will talk about podcasts. That's one of the reasons I want to target Joe, because of what she can do to help me grow. On the flip side, the brutal truth is there are not as many Joes in this world as there are. I'm going to describe a medium listener and a light listener next.
Right.
The Joes are hard to find.
Yeah.
The Joes are hard to pull in. They're your evangelists, right? I want them. But if I spend all my time trying to get them, and maybe that's my target, maybe that's what I want to do. Okay. I'm not going to say it's the wrong approach, but if you want to grow with numbers, there aren't as many Joes.
Yeah.
Okay. So let me switch to person number 2.
All right.
This, for the listening audience, can you see this? For the viewing audience, can you see that okay?
Yes, we can.
This is Rebecca. She's a new mom, and she's cuddling her baby in the photograph here. Rebecca is the medium podcast listener. She listens sporadically, but regularly, say 2 to 4 episodes per week. It kind of depends on her mood and her availability. Baby sort of dictates a lot of her life. She follows a core list of 5 to 7 podcasts, but she doesn't always listen to every episode. So she's got a library of, say, 5 to 7, but she might look at the episode art. She might look at the title. Yeah, they're not really. I'm like that with Hidden Brain. I love Shankar Vedantam. Once I'm into it, I'll listen to Shankar and I love what he's doing, but I haven't listened to him in like 6 months.
Yeah.
Even though I love the podcast. So she's kind of sporadic that way. She likes narrative driven personal development or lifestyle podcasts, true crime, parenting tips, relationship advice, wellness, sometimes light pop culture. Depends on her mood. She prefers the shorter episodes. So like a 60-minute or even a 50-minute episode. She doesn't have time for that. She'd dig a 20-minute podcast episode. 40, okay, but 40 is, I'm probably not getting to the end. Yeah. She finds podcasts through Instagram, through YouTube clips, or recommendations from friends, rather than actively searching for new shows. They sort of just come across her desk rather than her being a hunter-gatherer, that type. She listens during baby's nap time. That's a prime time for Rebecca to listen while she's folding laundry, while she's preparing meals, or sitting with a coffee. Me time. She finally got some me time, so she'll pop in a podcast and it's a reward for her. While she's scrolling social media, sometimes she's just scrolling through Instagram, brain jelly, she'll pop in a podcast at the same time. She'll listen on the go, using it as an alternative to music while she's running errands, taking baby for a walk in the stroller, or waiting in the carpool lane. And sometimes she listens to a podcast before she goes to bed, if it's soothing or conversational, something that helps wind her down. Her retention and engagement, she has moderate recall. She remembers the interesting anecdotes, the pithy quotes, things like that, or the key lessons, but not the fine details of an episode. She might share or recommend an episode to a friend. She may or may not, but she doesn't really, she's not leaving you 5 stars. Even you can ask her constantly, but she's not going to do it. She's the silent majority here. She probably won't leave you a review. That's just because Rebecca, that's just not, it's not that she's mean. It's just not her thing. She's not the type to join a podcaster's Patreon. She can become a committed listener if the podcast remains relevant to her life phase. For example, a parenting podcast while she's raising young kids. What phase of life does Rebecca think that she's in right now? And does the podcast speak to that phase of life? When it stops doing that, because Rebecca has entered a different phase of life, there'll be podcast churn. She'll probably still follow the podcast, but she ain't listening. Thoughts on Rebecca?
See, I think that I guess it's hard to cast a wide net, but I would have to think most podcast listeners, or a lot of podcast listeners, fall into that category.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah, and I think of my own consumption habits when it comes to podcasts, because there are many shows that I love, but I don't listen to every episode. It's typically, how are they grabbing me from this week's content? Is it a good title? Is it content I care about? Do they have a guest that I want to hear more from? I think that's the intentionality that a lot of consumers have these days, because there's only so many hours in a day. And they've got those responsibilities like raising kids and making meals and folding laundry and a job and all of the other things that come with life. It's hard to, you go back to Rebecca, that's borderline craziness to be listening to that much podcast content. But you're right. Like, there's probably a few people out there that's what they do. Do you think Rebecca could ever become Joe?
The hardcore. So could Rebecca the medium listener become Joe the hardcore?
Would she ever be like, I'm so into this podcast thing, I'm going to go full bore and
of course it's
graduate
possible
to the next level?
But if you give me a funnel and does it mean most? Absolutely not. I'm sure there's like a little tiny funnel where some mediums turn into hardcores. And I'll bet it works the other way too, that some hardcores, and I'll bet the funnel moving the other way, that hardcores go to medium more likely.
I would think you're right. That makes more sense to me too. Again, it comes down to time.
So how do I get the medium? How do I draw Rebecca's attention? I have to capture where she is in her life. So, okay, Rebecca's a new mom, but maybe someone else just finished getting their real estate license. They're looking, maybe podcasts about real estate, but maybe podcasts about psychology, maybe podcasts about nudge theory, right? They're looking for things that are going to help them in that moment in their life. Mark, good to see you. I think
Going on, Mark.
I think I see.
Good to have you here again, my friend.
They're looking for something that speaks to them in their life at the moment. What's in it for me? You mentioned that. And so it speaks to all the more that you should niche your podcast. Don't treat it as a generic, I'm Mel Robbins, and I'm just going to say, hey, gang, and everybody knows me, and I'm going to talk in general, because Mel Robbins is a unicorn. So is Joe Rogan. So is Brene Brown. They don't exist. Not in real life. not for you and me, right? You and me, we have to niche. The riches are in the niches.
Let's talk about your show before we move on to our light listener, because
go on.
Well, stories and strategies. I want to bring this up because you and I had a blast when I
had a great episode.
Made a guest appearance on your show. I love that conversation, and it made me realize that I want to venture into that world a little bit more, because it wasn't just talking about podcasting. It was talking about something more. I guess we could call it pop culture. I call it more cringe culture than anything, but we went in on the Hawk Tua girl, Haley Welch, and that it was an interesting conversation to say the least. I highly encourage anybody to go check that episode out, but overall, check out Stories and Strategies, because as I learned, the world's most listened to podcast about
PR
public
podcast,
relations.
PR podcast. Yeah.
By Refonics. So good for you. That's awesome. So tell us, was there ever a point where you realized that you were in a certain spot and you needed to niche down more with the content you were producing?
Yeah. Well, with the title, I think I honestly, I'm an old broadcaster, so I think instinctively I had my idea. We open every episode. It is a podcast for public relations pros. You're right. Mm-hmm. And what we really do, Emily Page, my producer, and I, what we really do is design a podcast that's about human communication. And we package it up for PR people, because a podcast about human communication, I just find that kind of hard. It's not niche-y enough.
Yeah.
If we were a big network, maybe I could do that. But we got to pitch it as a PR podcast. Mm-hmm. There was, at the beginning of every episode, we tell a story. And I think the story on the episode we did about the Hawk Tua girl was, I told the story about Haley Welch and Hawk Tua, and the fact that in the original video, she's so completely distracted. She's not even paying. I think she's half cut while she's doing the interview. She's on the street in Louisiana or
Nashville.
Nashville.
They were on Broadway.
Yeah. And she's like talking to this like street vendor with a mic, kind of, there's lots of them. And she says this outrageous, I'm not going to repeat it because
I think everybody's familiar. You don't have to go down that road.
She says this thing, I think because she's like half cut at the time, and it turns into a meme. There's no recipe for a meme. There's be ridiculous, but there's so much ridiculous out there. Not everything if that's ridiculous becomes a meme, but it becomes a meme. And Logan Paul, I think it was Jake Paul. I messed that up in the episode too. Jake Paul.
I'm here for you.
Loves it, digs it, says, let's make a podcast, call it Talk Tua. I've got the vehicle to make this famous. Mm-hmm. Here she is getting her 15 minutes of fame. Oh my God, tap into this. Bill Maher decides to go. Anyway, and it disintegrated for her. I'm getting distracted. For me, the hinge moment was, my original idea was to open with a story. We still do that. But then I wanted, in the middle of the episode, every time, based on a point that my guest made, I wanted to play a scene from a sitcom or a movie. And it just became too hard for me to do that every time. Then the other piece was, the title was originally just Stories and Strategies, because I have this huge emotional attachment to that name. I know the way the human brain functions is by story.
Yes, sir.
Well told story, not
100%.
boring onion on the belt story.
Yeah.
And the reality is, every time we communicate, there should be strategy. And if there ain't strategy, you're listening to a grandparent who's blathering on, who their strategy is human companionship. Sometimes we do, and sometimes we don't.
Yeah.
When I called it Stories and Strategies, we had modest, easygoing growth. Nothing, right? Mm-hmm. Chug. Changed it to Stories and Strategies for public relations and marketing. And boom.
Very specific.
The SEO, man, based on the keywords.
Yeah.
That was the hinge moment.
Well, I'll tell you. No, and I love that you did that. That's something that I started doing this year too, because like I told you, this show, when it started, was never meant to be about podcasting. That wasn't the original intention.
Yeah.
But it went that way. And I knew, okay, I really want to lean into this because it makes sense. It should be about podcasting. This is what I do. This is what I want people to hear this. I want it to serve as a resource and help them with their podcasting endeavors. But if you see Let's Blow This Up and you just see that, how do you know that's what it's about?
It would come across in my searches some days. I'll tell you, boy, that's my more frustrating days. I might just trip across that.
So I put the tagline on it. No, I understand what you're saying. No, but I just kind of looked at my own fault in this of like, it never was meant to be this, so I didn't plan that. But now I have to do something that does indicate to a listener, this is what you're going to learn. So now let's blow this up, the world's most explosive podcast about podcasting.
Yeah.
And I may even tinker with that a little bit more too, but I like it. And I think that it does tell the story of what someone's going to learn when they press play on one of our episodes.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the point, 3 seconds to earn 3 seconds, to earn right? They need to know, is this something for me? And I just love Let's Blow This Up.
Thank you.
obviously have a lot of fun with that. So
That was I still love how that all came to life, because it was all in the aha moment of when I stumbled upon Bombtrack Media as the name of my company.
so good.
Not even 5 minutes later, because I knew I wanted to do a new podcast to go with it. I was like, let's blow this up. It just fell right out of my mouth.
Boom.
And like, that's perfect. And it fits. It's very on brand. And now the logo for the show matches up with the logo of the company, because I did a little rebranding going into the season. It's all coming together very nicely.
And doesn't it fit you like as
and
your
it does. It
right?
really does.
Like I see you and I think let's blow this up in a good way. In a
Yes,
nice
I gotta lose some weight, Doug. You don't have to hold
That's
that.
not what I'm saying. I'm saying let's shake the foundations when I see you and I listen to you. I think it fits your demo.
Well, thank
Really.
you. And
Yeah.
and you're right. Like we said, we were talking about this before we went live tonight. I think that the overall mindset of how people, especially business people, utilizing podcasts to elevate their brand, how they think about podcasting, in my opinion, needs to change. We do need to blow up some thinking. We do need to start looking at this differently, because having a podcast for your brand is not the same as I'm building a media, entertainment, celebrity-based podcast like a Joe Rogan, Mel Robbins, something that's going to go gangbusters right out of the gates and get millions of people. Like, that's not the objective here. The objective is to communicate with the right people and walk them down this path of how are you going to help them solve a problem? Is your podcast going to grab their attention on the front end, give them really nice cover art, a great show description, all of these things that make a person get invested as time goes forward? Now you're front of mind when they're ready to solve that problem and invest in a solution to make it happen. That to me is where we need to change.
It's kind of like buying a product, right? You think of a brand of vehicle that you're loyal to, and you know what the drive is going to be like, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
you're building the same thing with your personal brand and your organizational brand. When someone pushes play on your podcast episode or watches your YouTube or Facebook live stream, they're spending something. They're spending something preciously important to them, their time.
Yes.
Right? There's a price that they're paying for that. You better deliver, man. And you better every single time. It's like watching the Pirates or the Penguins play. And if Sidney Crosby doesn't have a good game, if the Pens don't play well, or Pittsburgh's a football town, if the Steelers don't play well, it's like, why did I spend?
I think it's going to quickly
on this game. It's
going to quickly become a soccer town, because our hockey team sucks. Our baseball team is just a shit show. The football team can't figure it out. The college football and basketball, we're running out of, like, this is, my friends tell me I'm such a spoiled Steelers fan because we have winning records every year and I'm not happy. And I'm like, of course I'm not happy. Look, they're not going to do anything with that winning record, but lose in the first round of the playoffs, and it moves them further away from the draft picks that might actually help them build to get back to the Super Bowl level team they used to be.
Dude, I'm a Cowboys fan, so I just commiserate myself in. It's just Jerry Jones has killed us.
Oh man, it's so bad. There's so many teams that you just like my family are Bills fans, and I feel so bad for them. I just want to see that.
I love the Bills. I grew up in Toronto. I love the Bills.
Gotta love the Bills. I want to see them just get one. Just get one. I've always watched my family suffer with this team for all these years, and so it's a shame. This year was a shame. I really thought they could have done it this year. But that's a story for another day.
The Eagles, because you got Pittsburgh and you got Philly. The Eagles winning the way they did in the Super Bowl, but beating Kansas City, which, all of America except for Kansas City and maybe parts of Missouri.
And then we got this guy, Mark Ronick, go Commanders.
Oh, dear God.
Well,
hey, Cowboys fan, Mark.
It's probably why he's dropping
Don't do that. They stole one of our coaches, and now they're succeeding.
Well, that's to say, they really turned some heads this year. I think you're going to have a lot to be scared of in the NFC East there, Doug.
Oh. Trained by the Cowboys. That's all I'm saying. But that the Eagles winning the way they did in the Super Bowl, people in Pittsburgh, was that a hooray, or was it yes? All right, Pennsylvania wins. How'd you feel?
I don't know. I was told by a mutual friend a friend of mine that there's apparently a very big contingent of Philadelphia Eagles fans in Pittsburgh, and they were out on the streets going crazy down in Oakland in the South Side like they would at the Steelers one. I was like, wow, okay. I had no idea. My late uncle, he was a huge Chiefs fan. So I always have a soft spot for them too. But even this year, I was like, God, it's something different, please.
I do love Andy Reid. I love Andy Reid, but Patrick Mahomes.
Yep.
And the whole Taylor Swift thing, I've had about.
You
I've
want
had my fill.
you want to talk about the psychology there. How do you get invested in a sports team? And that to me is something, as I've gotten older, I've learned it's entertainment. It's not going to affect my life one way or another if they win or lose the next day. I've still got to get up and do my thing. So I've been able to appreciate sports on a different level as I got older. I know some people are still breaking their TVs if their team loses in the playoffs. I'll never understand that move, but that's a story for another day as well. But you think about that. What are they doing to captivate you as a potential fan? And that sometimes is generational. Your father, your grandfather like a certain team. That's why you fall in love with them as well. There's a lot in that too that we could draw a parallel to podcasting with in regards to why do you stick with this team? I know the Steelers are doing nothing that's going to make them move forward, but I'm sticking with my team as much as I might bitch and complain.
Because it doesn't feel right to switch.
It doesn't.
Like cheating on a spouse, man.
But there are some people, like, that's the thing. Like, I'll always root for teams that my friends like and my family likes if my team's not involved. But if my team's involved, I'm,
Do you see that?
They're the miserable ones.
There was a Seinfeld episode, and I think they're at like a Rangers game, and they're Seinfeld's kind of humor, observational. He's saying, so and so doesn't play for the Rangers anymore. They're playing over here. And this other player, we used to boo him, but now he's playing for the Rangers, so we cheer him.
You're just rooting for clothes. You're just rooting for clothes.
Cheering for laundry.
You're cheering for clothes.
Hooray for the laundry. So that's the power of logo branding, right?
Yep. Oh, 100%. You think I remember the old argument, people because a lot of my friends are Buffalo Sabres fans and they hate Sidney Crosby.
And probably Jack Eichel.
Well, wow. Yeah. So you're telling me if Sidney Crosby came and put on a Sabres jersey and started playing for your team, you'd still hate him. Oh yeah. Screw that guy. I'm like, bullshit.
No
you are
way.
So full of shit.
I'm in Canada and I'm specifically in Calgary. We do not cheer for Connor McDavid. He's not McJesus to us. He's the Antichrist. Okay. We boo vociferously. Not apparently like we boo anthems, which I'm just disgusted. I'm disgusted that Canadians are doing
that was bad.
But we boo Connor McDavid. He played for Team Canada in the Four Nations Cup, which was so glad so many Americans watched and got into it. I don't care. I actually don't care who won. Hockey won because more people watched the game. But I found myself, he scores the winning goal, and I'm like, hooray.
Yeah.
I feel guilty. Why am I? This is icky. I'm cheering for Connor McDavid. I have to have a shower.
It was a different shirt. He wasn't wearing the
different laundry
sweater. He was wearing the Canada sweater,
the Maple Leaf, which is just because that's my country. That's what I cheer for.
Right. Yeah. Well, Doug, we should probably get back on track here because we're going to run out of time because there's two more things I want to talk about. One more, you're a light listener, and we got to talk about the Podcast Professionals Association that brought us together.
Yes. Okay. So
let's do our light listener.
Light listener. I'm holding up a photo of Brian as he's listening to podcast. Middle-aged Brian. I would call him the light guy. He listens very infrequently, maybe one episode per month. He may or may not subscribe to a podcast, and usually when he listens, it's kind of by accident. It just sort of appeared in front of it. Hey, he checked it out. He doesn't have a dedicated podcast app. He listens through Spotify or Apple or YouTube if he sees a clip and it catches his attention. He prefers the more mainstream, more network level podcasts like Smartless. Maybe he listens to Joe Rogan because everybody else listens to Joe Rogan. Or maybe he listens to Mel Robbins because everybody seems to be listening to Mel Robbins these days. Doesn't follow any specific show, though. Listens might probably checked out Talk Tua because there was a lot of hype about Talk Tua, right? And that's probably the kind of listener Haley had. Folks that don't miss her podcast because they were light listeners to begin with, and they really don't care.
Yeah. Well, and they proved that before she even went away.
Exactly. But he rarely finishes an episode. He kind of starts it and then sort of just loses interest even a quarter of the way through. Rarely gets through it all. He will, though, if he's like taking a long drive or if he's flying somewhere, he'll probably download a couple episodes in advance because, yeah, he's got to kill some time and doesn't have any good books he's reading right now. So, yeah, I'm going to check out a couple episodes I've been meaning to get to. And in so doing that, if someone says, are you a podcast listener? Brian usually says, oh, yeah, love podcast, listen all the time. But he doesn't. He's really listening to 1 or 2 per month. He'll listen at the gym. If friends or coworkers are discussing a hot new podcast episode or a show, he'll probably check it out just because it's at the water cooler. He does look at YouTube clips and TikTok, and sometimes that's what propels him to check out the podcast. And that to me is really important because we all use shorts and TikTok reels and Instagram reels. We're probably pulling in the light listener by doing that, not the heavy listener or the medium listener. Brian has very low recall for things that he's heard on a podcast. He might remember something, but he can't attribute it to the podcast or the host. For the life of him, it feels like somebody said it to him in a sentence. He rarely subscribes or follows or engages. Well, almost guaranteed he won't leave you a 5-star rating or a review. None of that's no way, because he's not even finishing the freaking episode.
Right.
He might return to an episode if it has a viral moment, but he won't actively seek it out at all. And he is the least likely to become a dedicated listener. He treats podcasts like an occasional background option rather than a core media habit. And I would suggest, I think there are way more Brian's light than Rebecca's medium, and way more Rebecca's medium than Joe heavy. And I think that's why network podcasts thrive on downloads.
That's a very good connection. I think Brian is the absolute reason why you should repurpose your content, because he's more than likely going to consume bits and pieces over the whole show. And maybe, just maybe, your little bits and pieces is enough to captivate him to go check out that whole episode, but probably not. Which, again, sometimes you can get enough from just those little clips to satiate somebody.
They do.
And that's fine too.
They do. Yeah. That's part of branding, to be totally honest. If people know your podcast only from the TikTok reels that they see, that's part of branding. As long as your overall brand approach stands for something that's different, it's blown it up, so to speak, that's part of your effort. So to repurpose your podcast content and gain benefit with some in your audience only through TikTok or only through YouTube or only through X or Blue Sky, that's perfectly fine. That's perfectly fine, but tailor your content to those channels. What speaks to people who use those channels the best.
Yeah. Man, I tell you, I knew this was going to be a good topic to dig into tonight.
I love this stuff. This stuff.
Yeah, and again, I think we could probably go on for another hour digging even deeper. So I smell sequel down the road.
We've done talks with listeners, not just to our podcast, but some of our clients. The reality is the folks who sign up to do those talks are probably the Joes, the hardcores.
Yeah.
Right. They're right into your, and you've just got to understand that that's who you're talking to. Getting Brian to sign up for a focus group kind of thing, deadly. No way. And Rebecca's looking after baby.
Right. Well, if Brian signed up for it, would you even want him to? Because how valuable is his opinion going to be to your overall production?
If I'm Tom Webster doing one of my surveys, I want Brian because I got to understand more about that psychographic, because there's so many Brians out there, right? But that would be the reason. And then I want to start digging into, how do I nudge Brian to become Rebecca? Yeah.
Nice callback, my friend.
Thank you, sir.
It's like you've been doing this for over 20 years.
I remembered to do
that. Well, I like I said, Doug, this has been amazing stuff, but to wind things down, we got to spend a few minutes talking about the organization that brought us together. The Podcast Professionals Association is the season 3 sponsor of Let's Blow This Up. And that's how you and I touch base for the very first time in one of the Wisdom forums.
Yeah.
when I first joined. For those that aren't aware, check out podcastprofessionalsassociation.com. You can learn more about this organization, but they're the first real nonprofit trade organization in podcasting. And when I learned what their mission was from Tracy DeForge when she joined me on the show last season, I was in. I knew. I was like, this is something we absolutely need. What first attracted you to the PPA?
You and others. Just Eric from Lightning Pod, Tracy, whom I'd seen present, and the opportunity to be part of an association whose ethics I completely agree with.
Yeah.
And who are simply trying to encourage people to listen to podcasts, but also to create responsible podcasts and to share ideas. I think it was Eric, that specific Eric Johnson at Lightning Pod.
Yeah.
It's at Podcast Movement in DC basically said, "Hey dude, do you know about this? Come on out, meet some of the folks. And I think you should probably sign up for it." I've been looking. There aren't a lot of podcast producers up in Canada, not even close compared to the States.
Yeah.
And so it's just hard for me to find people who speak like I speak and talk like I talk and have ideas that are way beyond mine. And that's what I get from the PPA is I get to listen like to James Cridlin recently.
Right.
I get to listen to those ideas, and I feel I can take ideas from you, from James, from Eric. And then when I'm talking to my clients, I can say, okay, so here's the thinking in podcasting. We can try this other way, but here's the thinking, because there's no textbook in this business. This is a business of street smart people. That's podcasting. It's being learned on the streets now because it's changed so much. And I know like, for example, in Calgary, there's a lady pursuing her PhD in podcasting. Awesome. Because we should codify it, and we should put an academic application to this so people can learn it in a sped up fashion. But right now, this game is learned on the streets. And the PPA is one of the efforts to help codify and collect the street knowledge so that we can all share it responsibly and ethically with all of our clients.
Yeah, no, I could not agree more. I've been a member for a few months now, and the events that I've had the ability to attend have been so packed with knowledge, information, insight, whether it's the speakers or just the conversations that end up breaking out because of the speaker's topic, or those bi-weekly or once a month wisdom forums where we're all just gathering around the water cooler, so to speak. And it's a collection of like-minded individuals with like-minded ideas, all trying to grow. And in growing ourselves, we're making the industry stronger. Again, when I heard about this for the first time, I knew I was joining. It wasn't even a question of me joining. It was a question of whether they'd want me. And I think they would.
I think long form communication is something that's missing in our society today. We're so attracted to short headlines and reels and 3-second sound bites and all memes and all that stuff. And that's cool. I scroll shorts and Instagram as much as anybody, but I think long form conversation will help us as a country and as a society, because some things in life can't be captured in 3 seconds. Yeah. Sometimes it's complicated, and sometimes we should argue it. And sometimes we should be that much more authentic. And short of a book, the only other form of long form communicate, well, you're doing this on YouTube, and I think that's brilliant. Yeah. But podcasts have proven, audio has proven its way to do this. So to form a group like the Podcast Professionals Association that stands for the ethical use of podcast development and to help businesses and brands, it's sorely needed. And I hope that attracts more people.
I hope so too. So if you're in the Bomb Squad listening to this and you're in the podcast industry, whether you're an editor, whether you're a producer, you're doing something to better the podcast industry and help others do the same, highly recommend checking out the website. Reach out to me, reach out to the founders, reach out to anybody. We're all willing to talk about the value of this organization. And as our friend Jay says, that's what matters most.
Nice.
Absolutely right.
Nice.
So, Doug, I want to take this opportunity to once again thank you for being here to help me kick off the live streams for season 3. Couldn't think of a better way to lead this bad boy off than by having you here on the show tonight. How can people check out what you're doing over at Stories and Strategies and everything else that you've got going on?
Easiest on YouTube, just look for Stories and Strategies. And if you have to put Stories and Strategies podcast for the search engine, that's fine. But we'll pop up, blue logo. On the web, Stories and Strategies. And you can punch in podcast production to find us. Send me an email. Connect with me on social. I connect and chat. I can't stop talking about podcasts. So I'm a real easy connection. Real easy.
Well, I will make sure to have that linked in the show notes in the audio replay and on YouTube as well. So I highly encourage connecting with Doug. Look up Stories and Strategies, the podcast, and check out Doug and I's episode breaking down the rise and fall of Talktua or Hawktua, whatever.
Still link to that. Yeah.
Yeah, right. I should just put okay, there you go. I'll put the link to that in the show notes as well so everybody can check out our conversation there.
Killer. Jason nailed it in that episode.
I know.
Are you in Chicago at the big podcast conference at the end of March?
I'm not going to be able to make it to that. No.
Okay. I'll miss you.
Yeah. I was kicking the idea around. I've actually got a couple other things I've got to do that week. So not going to happen. But one of these days we'll be able to connect in person and break bread, drink the vodka that you've got in your glass and mine in person.
There will be wheat and maybe some barley.
Okay. I'm completely on board, and I like where your head's at. So, Doug, again, thank you so much for being here. Bomb Squad, same to you. If you watch live, glad to have you here in the audience. We are here every Wednesday night at 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Go to bombtrackmedia.com/live, and you can connect to your favorite platform, or you can even watch it there because I have the YouTube video embedded on my website. So next week, same time, same place, we'll be back with more great podcast talk. And until that day comes, on behalf of Doug Downs, my name is Jason Sircone, reminding you to stay explosive. See you next week.